The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. Potentially big changes in the criminalization or lack thereof of drugs in Oregon, where if you are a first-time offender and you are caught not with marijuana, but with heroin, cocaine, methamphetamines, other illegal drugs, you will now face less jail time and smaller fines under a new bill that the Oregon legislature has approved. And the idea is directly to tackle mass incarceration. And the bill that was passed late last week has reclassified possession of several drugs from previously being a felony to now being a misdemeanor. And of course, misdemeanors, by virtue of being less serious in the eyes of the law than felonies, carry along with them a smaller, less severe punishments. And the idea is, if you don't have a felony already, if you've not been previously convicted of drug possession, then by reducing some of these possession charges to misdemeanors, you would be more able to seek treatment for potential drug addiction as a public health issue rather than risking being further hardened as a criminal while sitting in prison for possession of drugs.
Well, it's not just that, but also when you get out of prison, you're going to face barriers to housing and employment.
By virtue of being a felon.
It's this vicious cycle where you still have to survive, and maybe then you have to move on to, say, violent crimes or even things like theft and go back into prison for perhaps entirely different reasons.
And it's not just Democrats in Oregon that are in favor of this. State Senator Jackie Winters, who's a Republican, is co-chair of the Public Safety Committee, and she supports the bill and says we can't continue on the path of building more prisons when often the underlying root cause of the crime is substance abuse. Now, not everybody would even agree with that, right? I mean, it's sort of enlightened for a Republican, but many would argue that it's not necessarily a substance abuse issue that leads to people merely being caught at individual points in their lives possessing drugs. But that's okay. I mean, this is a Republican after all.
Well, especially, I mean, we see this disproportionately affecting the poor and minorities. I mean, there are plenty of rich white folks on Wall Street who are bumping cocaine day to day, and yet they don't go and get caught. Or if they do get caught, then they don't face any serious repercussions because, you know, you don't want to say the law's on their side, but certainly they can afford better lawyers and they can afford to make bail and they don't face the same consequences.
And the application of the law is not on their side, but the way that the law is applied selectively, that absolutely is on their side. And we've talked about this because there are reports that directly contradict the sort of general narrative you hear from some that non-white people are more likely to use drugs than are white people. That's not true. What is true is it's more likely that they're going to get caught. It's more likely that when caught, they'll get arrested. It's more likely that when they get arrested, they'll get prosecuted. And it's more likely when they get prosecuted that they'll get sentenced to longer periods of time in jail or prison.
I think drug use among races are about the same.
It's pretty
when it comes
similar.
to rates.
I think that there are, I may be wrong. You know what? I shouldn't even speculate. I believe that alcohol addiction does vary more significantly by racial and ethnic groups. But because I don't remember the details, I don't even want to open up the possibility of misstating those data in a possibly discriminatory way.
Oh, that would be bad.
So I'll shut my mouth about it and move on to talk about Jimmy Carter's solar panels.
I mean, I would just make one more final point, which is that this is definitely the direction we should be heading into.
Yeah, of course.
Even, you know, aside from public health and, you know, what's going to ultimately decrease drug abuse, I just think that whatever you choose to put into your body is up to you. And you're not a criminal if you decide to do that.
You're not a criminal if you decide to do that. However, if something is a controlled substance and you're choosing to put it into your body, it still may be illegal for you to have obtained that, right? I mean,
well, I'm saying that you're not doing anything morally wrong that ought to be punished.
Fair enough.
The ideal sense.
And hey, that's how Portugal feels.
Yep,
and I went to Portugal and it was great. I was able to walk around in public areas and be offered saran-wrapped little egg-shaped pieces of hash. And it was an amazing experience. So that's what we have to look forward to.
Well, you chose not to buy it.
And it was my liberty that I had with regard to drugs allowed me to opt against buying hash out of some guy's pocket in Lisbon.
I might have bought it.
Just for kicks.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter leased 10 acres of land in his infamous hometown of Plains, Georgia. Who doesn't know at this point that Plains, Georgia is where former President Jimmy Carter is from?
A mere peanut farmer.
A mere peanut farmer. And by the way, he completely distanced himself from the peanut industry to avoid conflicts of interest when he became president. And I know it sounds insane given what's going on, but I'm not kidding. He actually did. Like he made sure that there was no doubt that he had separated from that business. He leased 10 acres of land in his hometown of Plains, Georgia, to be used as a solar farm. That solar project was finally completed in February, and it is going to have the capacity to meet more than half of the town's energy needs. Now, I know that this is a very specific situation. It's Plains, Georgia. It's relatively rural. The ratio of open space for solar panels to amount of power required is favorable for this, but there's many places in the United States that could do projects like this. And Jimmy Carter now, arguably a president who did way more good after he was president than during, although some in our audience would dispute that, continuing to do really, really good things. And half of the Plains, Georgia energy will come from this leased area of solar panels, thanks to Jimmy Carter. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, he also eradicated guinea worm, so you can add that to his list, building homes for people. And I remember a couple of years ago, he was diagnosed with cancer, I think both in the brain and liver. And you think the guy's 90 years old, this is probably going to be the end of the road for him. Turns out it's receding now, and he's 92 years old, still kicking ass.
I think the audience will appreciate your tact when saying many might have assumed it was the end of the road for him, because there are ways we could say it's likely someone was going to die that are more tactful and less tactful. And I applaud Pat for being able to use such tact and say it wouldn't have been crazy to think he was approaching the end of the road.
Oh, yeah. No, I've become a better wordsmith since appearing on this show. And if you remember, too, during his presidency, President Carter put up solar panels on the roof of the White House, and then his successor, Ronald Reagan, took them down.
Yeah.
So I think that's,
You really got to be a prick to go out of your way to remove solar panels that are already there. Like that's different than saying, hey, here's a proposal for solar panels and we need you to sign off on this and we need a site survey. You say, yeah, that sounds like too much trouble. Hey, there's already solar panels here. Draft up a proposal to get rid of them. You've really got to be genuinely on the wrong side of everything.
Maybe they were just so costly at the time, but nowadays they're not.
Yeah. By the way, Jimmy Carter also had solar panels put on the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library last year. They put 324 solar panels on the Presidential Library, and that is going to provide 7% of the library's power. Less impressive, I would say.
I would imagine the coal industry is not going to be entirely happy about this.
Oh, yeah.
But then if you look at President Jimmy Carter's record, he implemented the Federal Mine Safety Act of 1977.
Who could forget?
So how could you be mad at him for being against the coal industry when he has that on his record? Plus, adding to the National Park System and the Endangered Species Act, all these great things for the environment.
So you're a fan?
Yeah. I mean, he's not considered a successful president.
Yeah. Let's talk about filming the police. The Third Circuit Court of Appeals in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, has joined with 5 other courts in upholding the right of citizens, not even actually, citizens is the wrong word, of the people to film the police. And a lower court had previously ruled that filming police is not sufficiently expressive to fall under the First Amendment. In other words, to be constitutionally protected by the First Amendment, an action needs to be sufficiently expressive. And the lower court said merely taking out a camera and filming police is not expressive enough as an action to be similar to, for example, speaking your mind about a political issue. However, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals in Philadelphia overturned that and said, oh, no. Filming the police is sufficiently expressive to be constitutionally protected by the First Amendment. And now we are getting closer and closer. We are sort of building a judicial precedent here, which says that with the specific caveat that you can't interfere with what the police are trying to do, you don't need a reason to film the police. You don't need to be the person that the police are talking to film the police. If you are out in public and not in the way of traffic or the police or whatever, causing a public nuisance, you need give no justification to film police activity.
It seems completely obvious to me because you are out in public and also you're funded by the public dollar. And now we see the emergence of body cameras on police officers. So if they have the right to film us, why would we not have the right to film them? You know what I mean?
When it's happening in public, it does go both ways. And this also applies to, with the advent of consumer drone technology. This is something that's also being discussed. When we talk about wiretapping statutes and one or two party consent, when a lot of these considerations, when you're in public, go completely out the window. I think that this is the right decision here. I'm not somebody who says film the police in every situation. I'm completely okay with people doing that.
Well, it could be good for your own safety,
sure,
I would say. But I don't think I would recommend it in most circumstances. Like let's say you get pulled over for speeding or something and you decide to film the police officer. If he was on the fence before about if he was going to give you a ticket or not, if you just appear there with your cell phone, like filming everything that he's doing, he's probably going to get upset and give you that ticket.
But hold on a second. Let me propose something to you, Pat. As Irish, British, American, white Pat, when you get pulled over for a routine traffic stop, you might not feel like it's worthwhile to film the police because you're not going in assuming that you're going to be discriminated against, that you're going to be treated in an unfair way, blah, 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 blah. Someone who is of a different background might say, no, even at a routine traffic stop, I feel the need to record the police for my protection.
Yeah, I could just be exerting my white privilege here,
Absolutely.
I guess. I mean, in the Philando Castile shooting, though, we saw that it really didn't make much of a difference. Well, I guess the girlfriend brought out her video camera after.
Right, because it was mostly
shooting.
Dash cam footage we had, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the second stuff that came out. Yeah, so I guess, it does depend on the circumstance. I'm just saying, though, that, even though you have the right to film the police officer, that doesn't mean that they could make them less upset.
No, absolutely.
That could enrage them.
There can be repercussions. There can be repercussions to filming the police, and we've talked about that before. And we actually broke a viral story a couple years ago where a Columbus, Ohio black man had been pulled over, and he filmed it. And only because of the fact that he had that video, it was ultimately sent to me. I reported on it. It was then widely reported on by a number of other media outlets, and it led to a meeting between this individual and the Columbus, Ohio police. And it was an absolute and total video-generated. It was only because he filmed the routine traffic stop that the discriminatory stop that took place was accounted for. And ultimately, he ended up having a meeting with his lawyer with the police.
It can go both ways.
Sure.
But I think the issue is you don't know which way it's going to go
ahead of time. You don't know.
Beginning of that interaction.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. But the right decision from the court. I probably will. I hope I don't get pulled over anytime soon. It's been a while since I've been pulled over. When I was younger, I used to get pulled over with some frequency. Will I film the police? Probably not.
Yeah,
I probably won't.
And
but when I have actually taken out my phone and started filming, even though it ended up being nothing, is when I've seen police out on a street and I'm approaching, and something about the interaction with the detainee does not seem quite right.
I think that's the time to do it.
Yeah. All right, that's it for the bonus show. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.